Welcome back to this special discussion with the U.S. Ambassador here in Sri Lanka and Maldives, Patricia Butanes. Ma'am, the recent comment made by Michelle Saison, the ambassador-designate for Sri Lanka, directs at reconciliation, and she says that more has to be done in terms of reconciliation in the country. Your thoughts on this statement?
Well, Ambassador-designate Saison was participating in the hearings before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and this is traditional, and before you do it, you read your statement. A statement which I saw, I was asked to clear on it, and I think her statement is a very accurate reflection of U.S. policy concerns in Sri Lanka. And as we talked about earlier, a big focus of the Secretary Clinton's interaction with Minister Pierce, of course, in Washington was on reconciliation and what the government was doing. So Ambassador-designate Saison was simply reiterating what I've been saying for 3 years, what Assistant Secretary Blake before me has said and said now, and what other senior government officials who come here have said.
So this is in complete accordance with the U.S. policy?
Yes, it is.
Ma'am, now, you said it is in complete accordance with the U.S. policy. However, Karunathilake Amnugama, who is the Secretary to the Ministry of External Affairs, speaking to a Sunday newspaper, says, if she is appointed ambassador to Sri Lanka and she continues to make such preconceived comments, then the government will look at taking further action. Now, this comes as a warning for the ambassador-designate Michelle Saison. How does the United States government look at this?
Well, you'll have to ask the ministry how they intended any statement. What I can't comment on what their intent was. But we took note of the remarks as well as, I think, some media misconceptions about Ambassador-designate's statement, and that's why we issued our press statement ourselves, to make it absolutely clear that Ambassador-designate Saison's statements were in complete accord with U.S. policy, and I think the ministry looks forward to working with her.
And Mr. Amnugama goes on to say in this particular reporting question, I am confident that the ideas expressed by the ambassador-designate and the U.S. government are two different ideas.
Well, again, you'll have to talk to the Foreign Secretary, but we've made it clear that that's not the case.
The statement that you all issued yesterday comes in light of this particular statement in question, am I correct?
Well, that statement as well as media reporting in general, there seemed to be a kind of misreading of Ambassador-designate Saison's statement and its relationship with U.S. policy. So we were already thinking of clarifying that because it's important, it matters, and that's why we issued the statement.
When you take a look at yourself, you served in Baghdad for 23 months. The current ambassador is also from Baghdad. Is Sri Lanka still a volatile country in the eyes of the U.S. government?
No, you've drawn a wrong conclusion. It doesn't really, where we served in our careers sometimes has an impact, obviously, where we serve. I mean, I have considerable South Asian experience. Ambassador Saison has served in South Asia. Our service in a place like Iraq is really kind of extraordinary. We draw on people from all geographic backgrounds to serve there. But she has distinguished herself in previous ambassadorial assignments as she has in Iraq, and I think she probably sees Sri Lanka as her reward. So you should feel flattered.
Looking forward to meeting her as well, Ambassador, to be very honest, when she takes office here in Sri Lanka. Now, the U.S. was the largest single buyer of Sri Lankan goods in 2012, taking nearly 22% of total exports worth US dollars $2.15 billion, a staggering number indeed. I want to know, Mr. Ambassador, how are things going to progress in the future in terms of trade, taking into account the current relationship the country has with the United States government?
Oh, I think the prospects for increased trade are excellent. And in fact, Ambassador-designate Saison in her statement did refer to the need for additional commercial advocacy. And in fact, Sri Lanka benefits from the trade imbalance. I mean, we are buying more and more goods, mostly apparel and tea and things from Sri Lanka. And unfortunately, Sri Lanka doesn't buy nearly as much from us. So we're hoping to increase trade in general, but I've spent a lot of my time here trying to promote U.S. exports here in Sri Lanka.
At the start of the year, Ambassador, the United States government wanted countries that depend on Iranian oil exports to cut down oil and make a significant contribution towards this particular goal in question. The Sri Lankan government has cut down oil imports from Iran by 38%. I want to know the developments with regard to taking such actions by the Sri Lankan government in terms of moving towards and addressing and fulfilling the needs of the U.S. government.
Well, it's not fulfilling the needs of the U.S. government. I mean, our actions in encouraging countries to reduce their oil imports from Iran has to do with ensuring the international safety and to discouraging Iran from developing nuclear weapons. I mean, it's not U.S. needs. It's really on behalf of the larger community.
But if you do not adhere, sanctions are being imposed on these particular countries.
But let me address, though, Sri Lanka, because I have to say that the Sri Lankan government has worked very closely with us. Has reduced its imports from Iran. I don't have the specific percentage, but I think as we announced, Washington announced yesterday, Sri Lanka is among the second group of economies that will benefit from a waiver from any kind of financial sanctions imposed on their institutions. So I think it's from a point of view of cooperation with us, I think it's very much a success story. The government was very, very cooperative.
When you take a look at the recent events in Sri Lanka, Ambassador, before the start of the presidential election in 2010, there were accusations leveled at the U.S. Embassy here in Colombo stating that funds were being provided to the common presidential candidate, and I interviewed you on this subject and you vehemently denied this as well. Mm-hmm. Now again after that, several months later, following the arrest of Sarath Fonseca, mm-hmm. the former army commander, the U.S. government brands him as a political prisoner. Mm-hmm. And in last year's report too, this is very clearly stated that Sarath Fonseca is in fact a political prisoner in the country. Now he has been released. The position of the United States government on this?
Well, let me reiterate what I told you a couple years ago. We in no way supported any particular candidate in the elections. That's nonsense. And I don't know how much more strongly I can say it, but there it is. When General Fonseca was arrested and tried, we did protest because we felt it really wasn't in keeping with judicial procedure, and he was being prosecuted for political reasons, not for any substance. When he was convicted, we did make a determination, as we do in other countries, that because of the way he was prosecuted and charged and convicted, that he met the criterion of a political prisoner, and he is, as you mentioned in our last two annual human rights reports, so designated. So his release is certainly welcome, as we would welcome that of any other political prisoner.
Ambassador, did you in any way exert pressure on the Sri Lankan government, or your government for that matter, to secure the release of the former army commander?
No, we were no way involved in the decision-making or any efforts made to release him.
One of the allegations leveled by many quarters in society is the fact that the U.S. government intervened for the release of the former army commander. Was there any discussion?
I can only repeat what I've just said, and I say it without fear of contradiction. We were no way involved.
We're now going for another short commercial break. When we come back, what is the way forward for Sri Lanka? All this and more after this short commercial break.